Welcome to an RPG in a Box Basics video tutorial. In this video, we're going to take a look at what is called the Thingy system. This is a system that's being added into RPG in a Box. It's still being added to over time, so more and more things will be added to this system. So as they're added, I will probably be updating this video. But for now, I'm just going to talk about what we have currently as of version what are we on? Version 1.2.3. So I'm just going to be talking about what's the current thingies that we have at the moment and how to use them, how they work. Okay, so there's various different types of thingies, and it all depends on what the asset is that you're trying to use. So whether you're using a tile, whether you're using an object, or whether you're using a character, certain thingy options will be available to you. So let's start with tile, where we have two options. So what you do is you start by selecting your asset in the map editor. So we can select this tile, go to the Entity Properties tab, scroll down to where it says Thingies and open this up. And we can see that we can turn this tile into two types of thingy, a conveyor or a turret. I'm going to go over turrets a bit later, and we'll talk about objects as turrets rather than tiles, but obviously just showing you here, you could also turn a tile into a turret by just turning that on and setting it up, okay? But we'll set an object up as a turret a bit later. But conveyor is a unique option specific to tiles. So objects and characters cannot be turned into conveyors, but tiles can. So because we've selected a tile, we could turn this into a conveyor, okay? Now, before we do that, let's actually make a tile that's specific for the conveyor. So what we'll do is we'll quickly go to a new tile, and we'll call this conveyor, and we'll make this passable. And then what we're going to do is just very quickly make something doesn't have to be too exciting. Okay, so there's our tile, and we'll just save that. So what we can do is we can go to the map editor, we can raise the grid up by 1, select our new tile, and we're going to place it down. Now, unfortunately, I've designed it wrong, so I'm going to go back into the voxel editor for a second. You see how if I set this to face the front, and I click this button, it's not facing the front. The arrows are actually facing to the left. So what we want to do is select the whole model and rotate it round so that front is facing front. And then we save that. So now when we go into the map editor and we select our tile, the arrow on the voxel model is the same as the pink-purple arrow that you see above. Right? You see when you select a tile, it's got this sort of pink arrow here. That's the direction of the tile itself. So we want the voxel model itself to match the direction of the rotation of the tile. That's important for the direction that the conveyor belt is going to go in. So for example, we want the conveyor belt, let's say, to go in this direction. So the arrow is to move the player off towards the left. So we want the purple arrow that's hovering above the tile to be going in that direction as well. So you want to make sure your tile, when it's rotated visually, is also going in the same direction as the pink arrow, because that's the direction that the player is going to go in, or character, whatever, is going to go in when they step on the tile. So we can now click and hold and place a row of conveyors like that, a line like that. And then we're just going to, I'm not sure if we can do them all at the same time, but we can select all of them, go to, no, so we have to do it one at a time. So we're going to select one of the tiles and then go to conveyor and turn it on. And then if you want to adjust the speed, make it faster, slower, you can do that here in this setting. We'll leave it at the default. So we're literally just going to click each of these and turn them on. And it's as simple as that to make a conveyor belt. So now, when the player steps on this tile, it's going to be a conveyor. It's going to go at a speed of 15. and it's going to move in the direction of the pink arrow. And we've made our tile look like it's going in that direction as well. So let's save the map and test it. So here we are in game. So if I now move over and step on the first tile, I'm being moved automatically and thrown off the other end. Okay, and that's as simple as conveyor belts are. Now, you can obviously adjust the speed, so we could make the middle one like 50 or something. So when you reach this one, you're going to go whizzing towards the left. What we could also do is select this one, and I think we can do it from here. What's the button? I'm trying to remember the button for a second. Let me select it. There you go. R. Yep. So now we're going to go off in this direction. You get the idea. And then let's just quickly do the last ones. Conveyor on. Conveyor on. Conveyor on. Conveyor on. And that should be 30. 30. 30. Okay. Let's change our starting position as well, so we don't actually start on the conveyor. Okay, so let's see if it takes us all the way around. So it should speed us up as it takes us down. And then sends us round this way. And then down. And then spits us out the other side. So you can do all sorts of things with conveyors. That's as simple as that to make them. So before we move on to the next thingy in the list, let's talk a little bit more about some of the other options that are available to conveyors. So I've just added to the conveyor model. If I open it up, I've just added, let me delete that for a sec. I've just added some frames of animation. So it's now got 7 frames. And if I scroll through them, you can see that it's just a quick scrolling animation where as one arrow goes off the tile, the other one comes down and the other one starts to come in. Very simple to do. I just selected the whole tile and kept moving it to the left, and it's basically cycled round. Once you've got that set up, we're then going to click the Add Animation button, and we're going to click the magnifying glass and we're going to click Default. You could just type Default, but as it's a predefined animation name, we can just type it straight away. And then you set your start and end frame. So in this case, all frames 1 to 7. Type loop because we want it to loop round. You can adjust the speed if you want so it fits the time of your conveyor. So we could say 15, for example. And then if we preview it, there's our animation for our tile. So because this is called default, this is going to basically play on map load. And so that's going to be the animation for our conveyor belt. Okay, so if we save the tile, go back to the map editor, and we select our conveyor and we place some down. So before we get into testing, the other thing that's important to note is with grid mode, these green lines, as always, the navigation lines are super important. So if your conveyor belt doesn't have any way to access it, then it won't move you. Okay, you won't be able to get on it is the simple answer. Okay, but even if we put a green line onto there and a green line onto there, it's still not going to move you across the entire thing. Okay, so we'll test this in game. Let's save and play. I didn't set it up as a conveyor. That might be a good start. So Thingies, conveyor on, conveyor on, conveyor on, conveyor on, on, and this one as well, on. Right, okay, let's try again. That might help. Right, so try again. So now if we step onto the conveyor, let's turn the navigation on again. Again, we're not being moved across the conveyor because there's no green lines going across the conveyor. So even though the conveyor is set to move us in this direction, if there's no navigation in that direction, it's not going to work. So in the map editor, as soon as I connect these tiles in a line with the green navigation lines, play again, it will now work. So if I turn navigation on again, and we step onto the conveyor belt, now it is actually taking us across the conveyor belt and it's following those green lines. And it will spit us out on the other side. Now, if we hadn't connected this end to this tile, we'd stop here. We'd be, stuck on the conveyor. So you need to have you need to have an access way onto the conveyor. You need to have an exit off of the conveyor, and you need to have the conveyor itself all connected on the navigation grid. Obviously, if you're playing in free movement, none of that matters. So we could, for example, completely disconnect the navigation, and it shouldn't matter. So we're in free movement now. So if I step on the conveyor, I get moved across, then there's no lines going in this direction. So free movement doesn't use the navigation grid, so it will just work. So it works in free movement as well. Obviously, you don't need the navigation grid for that. Let's go back to grid mode. And let's talk about some of the other things that you can do with conveyor belts before we move on to the next thingy. So some things to be aware of. If we go to the documentation and we type conveyor, we can see that we've got 4 scripting commands that we could put into scripts that control different aspects of conveyor belts. We've got disable conveyor, enable conveyor, set conveyor reversed, set conveyor speed. So we'll quickly go over each of these, and I'll go into game and demonstrate what they look like. So disable conveyor is typed like this. So disable _ conveyor, and then you have a group name as the property. Okay. So what you would do first of all is you go into your map and you'd select all your tiles that make up your conveyor belt. So shift click, select all the tiles, press the G key to add them to a group. And if I just call this convey 1, now I've added them to a group called convey 1. So I can now can control the conveyor belt via that name. So if I go into game, before we go into game, let's look at the other commands that we've got. So we've got enable conveyor, which is it's the opposite. So it's enable conveyor via the group name. Then you've got set conveyor reversed, and this will basically do what it says. It will make the conveyor belt go in the opposite direction. Now it takes 3 parameters. It takes the name of the group, like the disable and enable do, but it also takes a couple of Boolean values. Is it reversed, i.e. is it going the other way? And should it reverse the animation? Okay, so I'll show this in effect in a minute so you can see the difference between the options. And then the last one we've got is set conveyor speed. Again, the group name, which is which conveyor are we trying to affect, the speed value that we want to change it to, so we can make it go faster or slower, and then a Boolean, do you want to change the animation speed? So if you don't, you can say false, and the animation will still play at the same speed, even if the conveyor belt is physically moving you at a different rate. Okay, so let's quickly go into game and take a look at those 4 commands. Now, obviously, you would put these into scripts. You wouldn't just type them into the console, but just for the video, I'm typing them in game so you can see what effect they have. Now, the nice thing about disable conveyor is it will automatically stop the animation for you. It's built into the command. So if we type disable conveyor and then we pass in a string the name of our group. So we put all of these tiles into a group called convey 1. So as soon as we press enter, it should disable the conveyor. And you'll notice that not only has the animation stopped, but if we close the console and go and stand on it, it's not moving us. So I can now walk across it manually. Okay. If I stand on the first tile of it, bring the console down again and we do the opposite. We enable conveyor. Oops. Convey 1. It should now play the animation and start moving us towards the far left. Okay, so that's what those two commands do. Very simple, just enable or disable conveyor, and then you pass in the name of the group of tiles that make up that conveyor. Then we've got set conveyor speed. Oops, let's get rid of that apostrophe. Set conveyor speed. So the first thing you pass in is the name in quotes of the group. So convey 1. And then what's the speed? So let's make it go faster. Let's set it to 50. And then a true or false to do we want this animation that's playing on the tile itself to speed up as well? So if we said false, then it doesn't look like anything's happened because the animation hasn't changed, because we said don't change the speed of the animation. However, if we go and stand on the first tile, we get whizzed along to the far end. If we were to run that again, but change this to true, I think that changed. It's difficult to tell, but it should have now changed so the animation is moving at the same speed as the, well, let's put it back. Let's put it back to 15. Let me restart the game for a second. I think I'm... Okay, so I'm not sure why it was doing that. This is the this should be an animation of 15. So if I set this to 50 and say true this time, now it's going at the speed at which the conveyor belt was moving. Yeah. And then if we put it back to 15, now it's playing at the speed at which you will move with the conveyor. Okay, so that's set conveyor speed. And you can simply pass in a number and then whether you want the animation to play at that speed as well or not. Okay, and then the last one is set conveyor reversed. And for this, you again pass in the group, so convey 1, and then this takes 2 booleans. So the first one is, do we want to reverse the direction of the conveyor belt? So yes, we do want to reverse the direction of the conveyor belt. And then the next one is, do you then also want to reverse the animation that's playing? So if we say yes, then those arrows will now go the other way. Now it's important to note that the arrows are not going to point the other way because it doesn't flip the frames, it just plays them in reverse. So you'll see what I mean. As soon as I press enter, now they're going the other way. But see how the arrows are still facing the same way? It's just that the frames are playing in reverse, okay? But now if I stand on this end, it will take me this way, okay? Because we've reversed the direction. Now it's important to note that it's not a toggle, okay? So if I run this again with the exact same parameters, so convey 1, true, true, it's not going to flip it to the opposite, okay? We have to actually say it shouldn't be going in reverse in order for it to go the other way again, okay? Because if you just did this again, it doesn't change anything, okay? You have to actually say false for the middle one, for the is it going in reverse, in order for it to not go in reverse, okay? So you can't just run the same command twice for it to toggle it back and forth, okay? And if we said false to here, and we also said false to here, although it doesn't look like it, it's now going towards the left again. But if we step on it, see how the animation is going the wrong way, but we're going this way. That's because if you look at the command, the last thing I said was don't go in reverse, but also don't change the animation. So it went forwards again, but because I said false to changing the animation didn't change to go that same way as well, okay? Whereas if I said, don't go in reverse, but change the animation, it's important to know, you notice how that hasn't changed. You do actually have to change the animation for it to take effect. So if I go, I do want to change the animation. Sorry, I do want to change the direction, but I don't want to change the animation. Okay, now the conveyor belt's going the right way and it's animated to go the right way as well. Okay. But in order to change the animation, we do need to change the direction. So I don't want it to go in reverse, but I do want it to change direction because it's currently going the wrong way. Okay, so now it's going not in reverse, and we changed the animation so it's now also not going in reverse. So now it lines up properly. I hope that makes sense. So if this command here, the middle one, is already set to the current direction, so in other words, it's not going to do anything when you run this command, because this doesn't do anything, it won't change the animation either. So we'll only change the animation if it can change this. So just make sure they're in line, or be aware of that. If you ever find instances where an animation is not changing to match the direction, it might be because you're trying to change the animation without changing the direction. So just be aware of that. And that's it. That's conveyor belts. It's, you know, gone into quite great detail on them. So that's all there is to really say about them. So with that said, we'll move on to the next thingy in the list. Let's start by adding from the asset library an object, because I don't currently have any in my project. So I'm just going to add a so a sword or something like that. Let's import that one. If needs be, I'll make a change to it if it's a bit simple. No, that's fine. So a nice simple sword. Okay, and let's just rotate it. Actually, I'm not going to bother. Okay, so we'll, that's fine. So I'll place this on the map. So here's our object. And we're going to select it. And we're going to go through the thingies that you can set on objects. So you've got 4 of them. You've got item pickup, door, pushable, and turret. So in this case, we're going to go for pickup. So what you're going to do is you can turn the thingy on for that option. And then you've got 2 options. The trigger event can be either character collides or character interacts. And this is going to be, how do you pick this item up? Collides is when you walk onto it, and interacts is when you pick it up, when you click on it. And then the type is what happens when you interact with this thing. Do you get an item? Do you get a specific loot drop, which you can set up in the combat editor? Or does it adjust a stat? So if we select stat, for example, that would then present 2 other options, which is what's the stat that you're going to change. So it could be your health, it could be your mana, or it could be a custom one that you set up in the stats editor. And then how much does it get changed by? And then it's obviously going to go up, but how much does it go up by? In this case, we're going to do an item. We don't have an item yet, so I'll just quickly go to the item editor. What I can do is load this up in the voxel editor quickly and take a image. And then I can go to the items editor, add a sword. Set that as the image. And we'll just make this, obviously you would make an equipable weapon and all that. I'm not going to bother with that. It's just to show you how to pick something up. So we'll just leave it as just a pick upable object. Maybe we'll give it a value. So it's 10 currency. So we can now we set up the item, we can select the object again. And set the item to our sword item we just created. How many do you get? So you could say 5, 1, 10, 100, whatever. In this case, 1. The sound effect, if you've used the sound effects editor to make a sound, you can set a WAV file. And then does it respawn? So in other words, can you pick the sword up again? Can you get more than one thing? You typically use this if you're harvesting things, like something that regrows, for example, or respawns. And then you can set the time between when you pick it up and when it respawns. Or we could say it doesn't respawn. So once you've picked it up, you've picked it up. So we'll leave that as character interacts, or let's set it to when you collide with it. When you collide with it, you get the sword item, you get one of them. Okay? And then because we're on grid mode, I will just add in some, green lines. So here we are in game. So if I walk over the sword, I immediately pick it up. So in my inventory now, I have the item, the sword item, and the object itself disappeared. And if we set it to respawn, let's say 10 seconds, it would then come back. It's not going to because we disabled that. Okay, so very simply, that is how item pickup thingies work. Very simple. Okay. Next, we have door. So let's go to Asset Library and let's go to door. And let's just pick this door and import it. You place the door down on the map, select the object, and turn on the door thingy. Now, as soon as you click this, you'll get this information pop up that says, note that the door mechanic is currently only supported in free movement. It will be coming to grid-based in a future update. I can confirm it doesn't yet work in grid, so this is still very much applicable. This is a free movement only option, okay? So once you've ticked this, you then have a few options. How do you interact with it? How does it open, sorry? Does it open when you click on it? Or does it open when you collide with it? Sorry, not click on it, because it's free movement. It's when you press the E key or whatever your interact keyboard prompt is. So when you press that key or when you walk into it, how does it open? Then you have an open sound if you created one in the sound effects generator, and a close sound separately to that. And if you've got an item, for example, maybe the sword is required to open the door. Obviously, it would be a key, more likely. You'd set up a key item, and then that way you can lock the door, and then you'd have to have that item in your inventory in order to for the door to open. If you didn't have it, it wouldn't open the door. Consumes item is also an option related to this. Obviously, that's not there if you don't have an item requirement. But as soon as you specify an item, you get 2 more options. Consumes item basically means if it's ticked, then the sword will leave our inventory when we open the door. So, it's like if you use a key, then the key is removed from your inventory once the door is open. Okay. If you untick that, you'll still have the key in your inventory even if you've opened the door. And then the locked script is a script that gets run if you don't have the item in your inventory. What does the door do instead of opening? So if, for example, we said the sword is required to open the door, we could create a quick script. Let's just quickly make a quick script called locked that says, let's just bring that down, that says this door requires a sword. Save that, go to the map editor, and we can put that on locked. Okay, and if we save that, we're going to need to set our map to free movement. Let's combine it with the other thingy. So we'll put the sword over there. Because it's free movement, we don't need to worry about the lines. We'll select the sword, turn it into an item pickup. Character collides. Pick up the sword, one of them. Great. So, now what you will need to do, this is the issue with free movement, okay? None of these things are working. The door's not working, the sword's not working. The moment we've turned this over to free movement, we've got some issues, okay? What is the issue? Custom collision. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to go to, let's delete the door for a moment because we're going to need to replace it anyway. We're going to double click the door, open it in the voxel editor. We need to make this not passable, so turn that off. And we're going to go to where it says collision override. We're going to say custom, and we're going to add a box, a cube. Okay. Now, obviously, this is far too big for what we want. So we'll make this, let's say 3. And then we'll just move it to the front of the door, or maybe even surround the door in it. Okay. And save that. We can also, in the voxel editor, we can also turn it into a thingy from here. So we can say this is a door. When character interacts, no sound, requires a sword, doesn't consume the item, and locked is the script. So now whenever you place this item down, this object down, it's automatically a thingy. Every time you place one down, it's a thingy with the same settings. Okay? Obviously, we don't want to do that. Let's just check the door's working. So now we can't walk into the door, but we have the E prompt. If I press E, this door requires a sword, so the door's not opening and I can't go in. Okay, so the door's now set up. We need to do the same thing for the sword. We need to add a custom collision to it. Anything in free movement basically needs custom collision. So if you haven't added custom collision to anything, you're going to need to do that. We'll change the height, maybe just a little bit higher. And for now, I'm just going to leave it as that. Obviously, you would size it to make it more accurate to the sword, but it doesn't matter. What will likely happen when we place it in the map is that, obviously, I could have set the sword up in the voxel editor to be an item pickup, so that whenever you place it, this is automatically set. But for now, I'll do it this way. But what's probably going to happen is as soon as I enter this box, it's going to pick the sword up no matter how far I am from the actual sword itself, because the collision is that size. But let's give it a test. So we'll just try the door one more time, just confirm it is locked. If I press E, the door requires a sword. I can't go into it. I now walk over to the sword. Perhaps I need to make the sword passable. I might have forgot to do that as well. Let's check that. Because we're using collision. Double click the sword, passable on. Okay. So it just needs to be passable, and then with custom collision, and then it'll work. So now we have the sword. So now if I go up to the door, currently I can't walk in through it, but now because I've got the sword in my inventory, if I press the E key, the door opens, and now you can walk through, and then you can close the door and it blocks you, open it, and you can walk through, close it, it blocks you, etc. Okay? So that's a free movement door. That's how to set them up. They need to be a object with a open and close animation. We'll get to that in a minute. Talk a little bit more about that. And it needs to be a free movement map. And you just select it, turn it into a door thingy, set up, whether it needs an item, in this case, the sword. If you don't have it, so for example, if I drop this, when I try and open the door, it requires a sword. Right? So try and pick the sword up again. Oops, there you go. And now I can open the door. Yeah. So let's talk about the animations. If you find that your door is not opening, okay, so you've set this up, and when you click on the door or collide with the door, however you set this up, it's not opening. That's because of your animation names, okay? This is really important to point out. If we open this door up in the voxel editor, we can see that it has 2 animations, open and close. These are the names that the Thingy system recognizes. So if your door is called door open or door close or swing open or swing close or shut, if it's anything other than open and close as it's written here, then the animations will not play when you play the game. The collision will still update. So let me show you what I mean. Let's rename these animations. Let's go into the voxel editor and quickly rename. We go close. We'll rename that to shut. And we'll rename open to pry. I don't know. Do that. So the point is now these two animations are named something completely different to the inbuilt naming system. Okay. So now if we pick up the sword and we try to go through the door, we can't go through the door because it's shut, right? But if I press E, nothing's happened. The door has not, in quotes, opened, right? However, I can walk through it because mechanically the collision has updated. So you can walk through it and you can, when you're facing this way, you can close it again. And now I can't walk through it because the door is now shut. But we can't see the door opening and closing, right? That's because the animation names are not open and close, which it's looking for. Because you've got to remember that this is an automated system, okay? In other words, you just turn this on and there's no settings for changing the animation names. So how is this going to know that what your names are if you've named them something different, okay? Now, there is a way to use your own custom animation names if you want to. If you don't want to go to all that trouble, just make sure you're using the names open and close as they are in the default assets, and it will just work, okay? So for this, let's go to Asset Library and let's go to Crate. And let's use a crate. Why not? So what you want to do is make sure it's got custom collision, because if you're going to use it in free movement, it can be done in grid and free movement, but let's test it in free movement as soon as the map is set up as that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to collision override, give it a custom collision, and we'll just add a cube and we won't resize it. We'll leave it as that size for now. What we can also do from here in the voxel editor is we may as well turn it into a pushable from here. So we can scroll down in the model properties to the thingy section, turn on pushable, and you can adjust the speed at which you push something. So 15 is obviously slower than your default movement of 30. If you don't want to be slowed down, you can set this to 30 and then you'll push it at the same speed as you walk. Obviously, you can set per object different speeds. So if something's heavier, then maybe it's 2 and it really takes a while for you to push it. So let's say 10, for example, for this. And then terrain types is where can you push these things. So terrain types all basically means you can push it anywhere, no matter what the terrain is. You can say prohibited from, and then you can set a terrain type. I'm not going to go into terrain types in this video. So if you want to know more about terrain types, look up the basics video on terrain types. But this will basically allow you then to prohibit you from being able to push this box onto certain types of terrain. And then the other option is restrict to, and then you can restrict this box to certain types of terrain. So you can only push it on certain types of terrain. So for example, this could be a mine cart, for example, and you can only push it along the tracks. So you can never push it off the tracks. So in this case, you would restrict it to, and then tiles that have the terrain type track, for example, and then you can only push the mine cart along a track. And then you've got 2 tick boxes, pushable and pullable, so you can disable one or the other. So maybe you can only pull this crate, or maybe you can only push it. Maybe there's no handles to properly grab it to pull. It's up to you, but we can say pull and push, okay? And then we'll save the object. And then because we've done it on the object itself, all we have to do is just place the crate down in the map editor, and every single one of these should be pushable, okay? Now notice how when there are lines, it makes them orange. So in grid mode, that would already work as well. So these should now be working both for free movement and grid because we put the custom collision on the cube as well. So let's leave it in free movement for a moment and just test whether it works. So the way it works is you just have to walk up to a box in free movement and you should just push it. Now, I don't know how pull works necessarily in free movement. Maybe you can't pull in free movement. But we can certainly push. I wonder, can you push it off? Yes. And then if we go to grid movement, let's test this in grid movement. Now, in grid movement, not all of these boxes are going to work because these two are not on the grid. Notice there's no lines. So two of these boxes are not going to work. So if I go up to this box, for example, I can't do anything because there's no lines leading to it. If I turn the nav on, oops, just so you can see, there's no way to get to that box, so I can't pull or push it. Now, the nice thing about the new thingy system is when you're playing grid mode, you don't actually have to grab the box. You can just move into it. So, for example, if I walk around the box and then just walk into it, I will automatically push it. And then when I let go of walking, I will let go. So you don't actually have to press, as you can see in the bottom corner here, you don't actually have to press the grab key if you're pushing it. If you're pulling it, you do. So if I press the G key, now I can pull it back, which you can't do in free movement currently, I don't think. And then press G again to let go. But if you're pushing it, you just walk into it. And you'll automatically push it to the next tile and let go when you're done. So for example, if I want to push this crate towards the edge, I can just walk into it twice. And as soon as I let go, I'm let go now. He'll automatically push it to the next tile and then let go when it reaches there. Okay? And I don't think you can push that off the edge. No, so in grid mode, you can't push them off the edge. So that is pushables, very simple. So now we come to the last of the thingy system, the last things you can set up in the thingy system, which is turrets. Now, the interesting thing about turrets is any asset can be set up as a turret. It can be a tile, can be an object. You can even set up characters as turrets. Okay? So, for example, I'll just demonstrate that. You can place, oops, didn't need to double click. You can place a character down, select them, and the only thing they can be turned into in the thingy system is a turret. Okay? But we can select a tile. We can also make that a turret. Or we can place an object down and, for example, this crate. And one of the four things you can turn it into is a turret. Okay? So we'll use object because it makes the most sense. And let's talk about turrets because turrets are, a little bit more involved. So let's make a simple model that we can have as a turret. So this is going to be an object. We'll call it turret. And we'll just give it a very simple shape. So there's a very simple turret, okay? We're not going to win design awards here. It's just to show you how to set up a turret. So you make your model that you want to have as a turret, in this case an object. Could be a tile, could be a character. Save it. Obviously you can set it up here as a turret, but we haven't quite finished setting things up. So there's our turret model. Next we need to make the projectile that's going to be shot from the turret. So to do that, we'll make another model, an object. We'll call it bullet. And we'll make this square. In fact, 8 by 8 by 8. Okay. And then we'll just very simply make a square or something. And then we'll save that. So, with that done, what you need to do now is you need to create on the both the projectile and the turret 2 attach points. So you're going to click the Create Edit Attach Point button in the voxel editor. We'll click somewhere on the bullet, and we're going to create an attach point, and it needs to be called very specifically projectile, all lowercase. Click OK. Done. Click Save, and then you're going to go back to your turret, and you're going to do the same thing. So we're going to click towards the center of the barrel of the gun, click, same thing, same name, same spelling, everything. Projectile, all lowercase. This is going to tell the turret where to shoot the projectile from. So this projectile is going to use this attach point and it's going to fire from this attach point. So it's going to match them up. The two projectile attach points, that's where the projectile is going to shoot from. Okay, make sure you save that. And then the last thing we need to do in terms of just making a projectile work, a turret work, sorry, is you need to go to the items editor and we need to make a projectile item, okay, because turrets use projectile items. So all we need to do is add an item. We'll call it bullet. We don't have an image. We'll leave it as none. But what you want to do is turn projectile on. This is where you can set the damage and everything on hit script. So when it hits something, what the firing sound effect is. But this is the important bit. The object model standard needs to be our bullet model. This one here. Okay. You should be able to click this button and it should show you the model. Okay, so if it's not doing that, you haven't set the pairing up properly. You haven't set the model on the item properly. Okay, so that's the important bit, is set the model to the item, make sure it's projectile on, set the damage as you want, the speed, the range, all of that. We're going to leave it as it is for now, but you can put on hit scripts on for when it hits things. We'll talk about that in a second. Firing sound effect if you've got one, etc, etc, etc. Okay, click save. And then we'll go to the voxel editor and we'll go to our turret. And now what we can do is we can go to the thingy section in the properties for the model. We can turn turret on and we can set the projectile item to our bullet item. This is the item in the item editor, not the model. It's this item here. We're telling it to use this item. And then you set the interval. So one bullet every second, or one bullet every 50 seconds if you want it to be slower, or if you want it faster, every 0.1 second, it's going to be like a machine gun, right? We'll leave it as 1 for now. Click save. And then go to our map and place our turret down. And let's have it shooting in towards the left. So we'll place that. You should know it's set up because you should see the turret icon in red above the turret. So if we place one firing in this direction, we should have two turrets, one firing towards the left, the other firing towards the right. And currently we're in grid movement, so we'll see what happens. So here we are again, okay? So you can see that we've got the two turrets firing, okay? And that's simple as that, really. Now, it's shooting me, so it will damage things as it hits them, and now I've been defeated. Now, it's important to know about turrets that they always fire in a straight line. They're not going to turn to follow you or anything like that. They're literally going to fire in a straight line. Same if you set it on an NPC. If you set a character up as a turret, they will always fire in the direction they're facing. So, for example, if I set my player character up as a turret, then if I was to fire, it would currently be going in this direction. If I turned to walk this way, it would now shoot in this direction. So it's always going to fire out of one direction, okay? But if the player or character turns, then that will obviously change the direction in which it fires. But just know that objects don't rotate. So, I mean, unless we can actually rotate it, let's try it. What you could do, let's try this. Self.direction equals north. Yeah, okay, so you could script it to rotate, but it's not going to rotate, it's not going to follow you like an enemy would. Like a enemy with a ranged weapon is going to follow you wherever you go. Okay, turrets don't work like that. They are locked on, whether it's a character or a object or a tile. It's going to always fire in the direction it's facing. So unless you script it to turn at any point, it will just fire in that one direction. Okay, so we could set this back to west, and it then fires the other direction. Okay, now some things to know about turrets. Other things you can do script wise, you can disable them. So obviously I haven't given these IDs, but I can use self for now as we're testing this. So if I aim my cursor over this turret, bring the console down, I can type self to reference this turret. So I can say disable turret, and then where you would normally pass in the ID of this turret, we can pass in self in this case. And now it won't fire anymore. We've disabled it. We could do the same with this one up here. Bring the console down, disable turret self, and now both turrets don't fire. Okay, and then obviously we can reverse that by enabling turret self, and now it'll start shooting again. Okay. Other things you can do is you can actually fire projectiles manually. Now, let's just aim at this turret, and if we type fire projectile, this is the command. So I'm showing you these commands, but obviously you would put these into scripts. You would actually, write these out in the script editor. But just to show you what they actually do while we're running the game. So fire projectile, then what you would do is you pass in the item ID. So in the item editor, when you made the projectile item, in this case the bullet item, it will have an ID. Now in my case, because it's, actually I don't know, let me alt tab and go and check. It's item 002, okay? Because our sword is 1. So that's the ID of the bullet. And then the next thing you want to pass in is where's the bullet firing from? The source. Well, we want it to come from the turret. So self, as I'm aiming over it. And if I press enter now, it should just fire a single bullet in the normal way it would have fired if it was on as a turret. Okay? But notice how it's not firing anymore because the turret is actually off. We've disabled it, but we just told it to fire a projectile. Okay, so you can script when these things fire as well. They don't always have to fire every second or however you've set it up. You can disable a turret and then trigger it whenever you want. So for example, we could make it so that whenever we enter this, sorry, I'm overshot. Whenever we step on this tile here, it fires a single projectile and hits us, right? Like a trap or something, right? But other things that you can do as well is if we rerun that command again, a third option you can put in is a target. So if I say player, now the projectile that gets fired by the turret is going to aim at us. Now in this case, I believe I'm right, we'll see in a minute when I press enter, but it should actually fly diagonally towards us, even though typically they don't when you leave a turret as it is normally. But if you give a projectile an actual target, then it will actually move to the target in a fashion that it wouldn't normally move by default with a turret. Yeah, so it does hit me, even though I'm not standing in direct line of the turret. Normally, the projectile will move to hit me. Okay, so if you do want your projectiles to sort of home in on a character with a turret, then use fire projectile. Disable the turret and use fire projectile and specify what's the projectile item, where's it being fired from, the turret, and who's it aiming at, whether that's the player or a character that's entered a tile or whatever. As soon as you press enter, it will create a projectile and move it diagonally, in this case, towards the player, okay? Towards the target, okay? Before we end out, the last thing to talk about with turrets is on-hit scripts, okay? So, let's create a quick script. And we'll call it hit me. And what we will do is we will just have it log message. And one of the simple things you can do is $target. Now, I think there's free, at the very least, I think there's free built-in variables you have access to with turrets. You've got dollar target, which is who just got hit by the projectile. You have dollar projectile, which is the projectile, the bullet. And then I think self might be the turret. I'm not sure. We could print self and see what if anything that comes back with. It might not even be one of the variables for this script. So we'll click apply and save. And let's put that on the bullet. So you go to the item editor, and in the projectile on hit, set this as hit me, and go into game. Okay. Now notice how the bullets are stacking up on the side here, and every time it hits something, the bullet. What's interesting is the bullet's going through the player, which is interesting. Oh no, there it is. It's not going through the player anymore. But, oh, that's because the player's dead, so it isn't there. But notice how in the top, if we run it again, you can see log message. It's showing us what it's hitting. So at the moment it's not hitting anything, but now the bullets are hitting the bullets. Yeah, so every time it's colliding, and as soon as it hits me, it says character Justin. It said it for a second there. Character Justin. Boom. So it's just target is always returning what you hit. And no, self is null. So there is no self in an on-hit script. I thought maybe it might be the turret. But to remove the if you're going to use an on-hit script, the common problem people run into is why are the projectiles remaining on screen? That's because if you're using a on-hit script, you need to specifically add to the script that you're using that it should remove those projectiles. So in this case, as well as logging who you've hit, we should remove entity dollar projectile. And then each projectile, when it's hit and run this script, will also be removed from the game world. So now when we get hit, the projectile gets removed, or if it flies off the edge of the map, it gets removed. And so now no bullets are hitting other bullets because they're not staying on the map to be hit. Okay, so that's how on-hit scripts work. That's how to use them. Obviously, you can then script it to do whatever you want, spawn something, say a message, whatever you want a on-hit script to do. Just remember that you do need to remove the projectile if you don't want it to stay floating in space whenever it hits something. And dollar target will return to you what it is that you've hit. And that will bring us to the end of this video. Sorry, it's been a bit of a long one, but obviously what I did want to do is go through all of the thingies and explain how they work. Obviously, if more get added, what I'll probably do is make a much shorter video going over these things, because obviously the more get added, we don't want this video to go on and on and on and on. But for now, just wanted to explain what we've got in there at the moment and how to use it. And I will chapter this video, so if you want to know how to do a specific thingy, it will be in the YouTube timeline. You can just click the link or on the timeline or whatever, and it should take you to the relevant chapter discussing how that particular thingy works. So with that said, that'll bring us to the end of this video. Hope it was useful and informative, and it's helped you understand how to use whatever the thingy is you're trying to do, whether it's a turret, conveyor, door, whatever it is. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out on the Discord. But for now, I'll wrap up this video. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next tutorial.